Welcome back to Realism Overhaul. Today we're going to be working towards launching the L4, the latest and greatest rocket in the Loner series of rockets. But before we're able to do that, we were able, since the last episode, to unlock 3 new engines. Well, actually 4, but the L4 only uses 3 of the ones we've unlocked. Those being the RD-108, the LR-89, and the AJ-10 early series. And unfortunately, all of these have a very, very high failure rate. So what we're doing here with this small rocket is testing the LR-89 and the AJ-10 as an upper stage. And these rockets have absolutely no payload. They're just designed to burn the engine and get data on them. And I've launched 3 of this rocket. And then I launched 3 other ones with just the RD-108. For a total of 6 test launches for the engines before we flew the L4. And luckily we had no engine failures immediately. I think the AJ-10 did fail twice towards the end of its fuel capacity, but we were able to get a ton of data from that regardless. Now the goal of these was to get these engines under a 10% failure rate. So when we launched the L4, it was about I think 6 to 8% failure rate for all of the engines, which was in my made up workable parameters. And I absolutely don't mind doing these missions because since we have no crew, X-planes are out of the question for right now. And also we're just buying time until our tech node unlocks with our Geiger-Muller counter for the next satellite contract, which should take about a year. And these launches here only take about 2 months to build, a week to roll out at the current time. And they're very, very cheap. So here we have the RD-108 being launched on a suborbital hop just to get some more data. And this is all footage that I streamed live on Twitch, link below. And for the video, we're only going to show one of each of these test launches. And as the RD-108 crashes back into the atmosphere, we now have enough data to hopefully safely launch the L4. The configuration is an RD-108 as the central tank engine, 4 LR-89s as boosters along the side, and an AJ-10 pushing our payload, which today is a simple science return satellite, a little bit different than the previous ones though. This one has the planetary photography instrument, as well as the biological capsule, I believe, in order to grab some science and bring it back to Earth. Now, in this configuration, the rocket's more powerful than we really need it to be, so this is more of a demonstration launch. Right now, this is able to send our payload into a very high orbit, few million meters above the Earth, and we don't have the communications range to reach that far. So we currently have a contract with our newly unlocked early, very tiny solar panels. So we've strapped 2 on there, and the contract states we need to have a periapsis above 300 kilometers. So we're looking for a apoapsis and periapsis just over 300 kilometers for this launch. here we have some anxiety-inducing situations here. One of the engines had a performance loss, number 3, and now we're about to see the failure of engine 2. And Yaw is just keeping this under control here, but booster separation, that tank is still full of fuel, so it's not going to separate all the way, and almost causes a collision. Luckily though, we are still on our way, and after reviewing the footage and thinking about it, this may have been my fault. The engines are supposed to have less than 10% failure rate. However, they're at about 10% failure rate by default. In the editor, you can do something with TestLight called Enable Extra Preflight, which reduces it even more with a little bit of an extra cost. And I did this for one of the boosters, and I think I forgot to do it for the other 3 because symmetry does not work with that option. So one of the 3 was about 8% failure rate, and the others were about 10% failure rate, which might have been the reason why we had those engine failures. However, RD-108 powers through, and we are still able to reach our mark of just over 300 kilometers apogee. Now this is the first time in this playthrough that I've utilized the Able Avionics core, which means we do have full control of the craft as long as we have communications. However, we only need to make one orientation change, pointing retro when we need to re-enter the atmosphere. So we really won't be utilizing that. But it's cool that we have that option now. And here we are just circularizing our orbits, and you see we are at a periapsis of over 300 kilometers, so we're just waiting 2 minutes until the contract is up. And then we can proceed with our secondary objective, which is gathering science. Now with Kerbalism, collecting science is different than stock. For instance, the first experiment we're going to run is the planetary photography, and this is able to gather, I think, about 3 to 5 maybe science. I don't remember the actual number. I think it was like 3.7 or something like that though. I may be wrong there. I can't read the numbers on the screen. So the way that works is it has that set amount of science, and once you collect enough data, the science experiment is considered depleted and will no longer collect any science. And we do have also the biological sample experiment here, which has the same thing. And pretty much all this data needs to be stored somewhere. So you have a limited amount of slots. Right now, the Reentry science capsule that we have early on here is able to carry 5 slots. And then the biological sample is able to carry 1 slot as well. So we have a total of 6 slots that we can take back to Earth currently. And essentially each one of these slots will be a certain amount of data for 1 experiment for 1 situation. In this case, we have low space biomes for each situation. So the science experiments are run, they are sent back to the capsule, and then we deorbit the capsule and collect the science. And unfortunately right here, I made a could have been fatal error. I forgot to unlock the electronic charge from the probe core of this command module here. And that means we cannot decouple our little boosters there. Means the KOS script didn't decouple that. And also we can't close the door because I forgot to close the door as well. And the reason I had this locked in the first place is the avionics core from the launch would drain the electricity. But I've since discovered in the editor, just like you can do with any fuel type, with electric charge you can set fuel flow priority, which means that the electric charge would not drain from this, and I could leave it unlocked for any future missions. Luckily, the door being opened wasn't a tragedy. Everything still survived, maybe. And yeah, we were able to re-enter. At first I thought the entire craft blew up during that explosion there, but I hit bracket and thankfully our craft was still alive. For some reason, hitting recover vessel here, we were not given a recover vessel screen right here, and we got no science from all the science in there. So I'm not exactly sure what happened, but essentially I'm going with the story of we left the door open, all of the science experiments melted, and we got no money back from it either. But from a mechanical standpoint, I was curious if for some reason nothing worked for, well, some reason. So we sent up a few, I think a total of 4, but only 3 gave back science. A few of these suborbital little hops are LR-89s on the bottom, so we have a bonus of collecting even more data for these engines so they don't fail again. But at the top, our payload is a planetary photography experiment with this same configuration for re-entry, except this time with the fuel flow priority for the electric charge set up so that that isn't going to drain. Although I don't think there's an avionics. No, okay, yeah, there's definitely an A4 avionics. That's what drains the electricity, but as soon as it decouples, it'll stop. And now we have our suborbital trajectory set. We are going to run the experiment in low space, move the science back to the return capsule, and re-enter and see what happens. Luckily for us, we were able to recover science from all of these missions. Well, 3 of the 4. The 4th one, we weren't able to go into a new biome. From the way I set this up, we weren't able to go far enough. However, with the science we've collected, we now gained about 17 total science from our 6.1 before, and that's enough to unlock lunar range communications, which hopefully means we can now send things up into high space and maybe fly by the moon as well. But that's for another episode. I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and peace out.